afternoon was warm, in the mid-40s, but the temperature dropped to 30 below zero by 8:47 that night when the quake hit. 131 people died. 500 more were injured. I'd left home early that afternoon. Our road crew had given up on trying to keep any access roads open. Heavy storms had forced everybody out of the high country. Everybody, that is, but us. The government had its reasons for keeping our installation operating through what normally would have been shutdown conditions. So they brought the snowcats in to shuttle us to the site. Still, it took till after sundown to reach the radio telescope. I can't say I had any real premonition of what would happen. When you're working a couple of 100 feet underground, maybe you just sense those slight earth tremors unconsciously. The computers were driving fine, keeping the big ear locked in on a distant location in space where no conventional telescope had yet revealed any planet or star. Most scientists concluded there was nothing there, even though we had recorded radio transmissions twice that week. Signals that came from that empty spot in outer space. Some of us were certain there was a planet out there. I couldn't concentrate on my work that night, though. So maybe it was a premonition after all. I kept thinking about my family. Poor Luke still had a slight fever. Cough medicine had made him restless. He was just falling asleep when I saw him for the last time. I can still hear those timing control circuits counting off each microsecond. I finished my last log entry at 8:43 p.m., just 4 minutes before the Earth tore open. Just a few hours earlier, Susan had been cooking. As usual, enough to feed the neighborhood. Never could bring herself to buy anything at the store that she could bake at home. The furnace was turned on. The oven was on. The first jolt tore the gas lines apart instantly. There was no way Sue could have gotten Luke outside before the explosion. At 8:46 p.m., the temperature on the surface was still dropping fast. The wind had picked up a little too. Still, all units checked out okay. The tracking system was holding the big dish right on target. By the time I'd reported to headquarters, there were less than 30 seconds left. 30 seconds before everything important to me in my life was lost. The dish was moving off target. Way off, like some giant hand was tugging at it. computers were fighting to keep her under control. Voltage to the tower motors shot up above the danger level. I knew the power transformers would blow if we didn't shut the control systems down. That was when I heard the signal for the last time. I was alive, but it didn't matter. The memories were more than I could handle. Luke, Susan. Why them? Not me. I was alone. Just my thoughts. Thoughts about how I might end my loneliness. My mind would not let me rest. Sometimes I'd get angry at myself for feeling self-pity. I couldn't find a purpose. There was nothing left for me. It got worse. Unbearable. The thought of how they died. Finally, I couldn't hurt any deeper. I was numb, totally exhausted. And that's when somehow I suddenly realized what I'd heard. It was a voice, a spoken message of some kind. But what did it mean? I spent the next 5 years tracking down every sighting, investigating various encounters, reading everything that just might help me find an answer. Then I discovered Dr. David Arlen's book. I knew he could help me. Unfortunately, I arrived a few months too late. Dr. Arlen had recently passed away. Mrs. Arlen agreed to meet with me.
Yes. Who's there? Identify yourself, please.
This is Alan Reed, Mrs. Arlen. I just talked to you on the phone yesterday.
No, this is him. You don't know that's Alan Reed, Miss. I was to meet you here at 3:30. Yeah, this ain't your...
We have an appointment?
Yes, ma'am. I'm the one who read your husband's book.
Asked to talk with you? We go off this time.
Mrs. Arlen? Please, Mrs. Arlen, I really need to see you.
No, this is Mrs. Arlen. No, this is... Please, Mrs. Arlen.
Yes. Of course. Please come in.
Dr. Arlen had spent over 30 years researching the subject of extraterrestrial life. He was also constructing a very unusual machine called the Betatron.
Mr. Reed, I'm Lisa Arlen.
I'm very pleased to meet you, Mrs. Arlen.
Let's sit over here where we can talk.
Thank you. I still can't tell you how disturbed I've been since I learned of your husband's death.
David was very highly regarded by a great many top research people. He had good friends all over the world, although he didn't do much traveling himself. Usually people would visit my husband in Eagle Rock, where his work was.
Well, I can understand their coming to visit him. After I read his book, I myself was compelled to meet him.
Yes, writing came very naturally to David.
Hey, Mom, is it okay if I skip dinner? Me and my friends are going to a basketball game at the gym. Our team really needs the help. Who's he?
Stephen, I'd like you to meet Mr. Reed.
What's he doing here?
Stephen.
Are you a reporter or what?
No, I've read your father's book.
Well, you're a little late if you want my dad to autograph your copy. Your friends took care of him already.
Stephen!
Look, Mom, I'll be careful and I'll be home by midnight. Is that okay?
Yes.
Love you. And be careful.
Sorry, Mr. Reed. But ever since David
I
died,
understand.
he's a bit bullheaded sometimes.
More like strong, like his father, right?
Where did you first learn about my husband's work?
In Texas. I met a young lady there. She gave me a copy of your husband's book.
Do I know her?
No, I don't think so. Her name's Elaine Stafford.
Stafford.
I know she wrote to your husband on several occasions, but all her letters came back indicating you had moved, left no forwarding address.
That's strange. Well, Stephen and I did move from our trailer in Eagle Rock when David became ill, but...
Mrs. Arlen seemed very uncomfortable. I thought it might be my presence there so soon after the loss of her husband, and I couldn't even begin to explain her son's reactions to me. So I told Mrs. Arlen as much as I could about myself, my research trip to Texas, about Elaine Stafford, the girl who had been the victim of so much ridicule in her hometown of New Braunfels. Elaine had reported an encounter with an alien being that had been published in her local newspaper and later was picked up by a national wire service. It was unfortunate that her particular report ended up construed as just another ghost story. Here, in the South, every little town seemed to have its share of haunted houses. Most of them were abandoned, and had been for many years. It was impossible to deny, though, that many of these houses, some of them hundreds of years old, seemed to be possessed with some kind of psychic presence, a sort of oppressiveness you felt the moment you stepped inside, the feeling that you were being an intruder, that someone or something was watching your every move. Elaine was an intelligent girl. For several months, she had been doing her own research on the subject of UFOs and alien encounters. And she had concluded, after reading Dr. Arlen's book, that encounters like hers were often misinterpreted by untrained observers, especially when the encounter had taken place at a location widely known for its strange psychic occurrences, a place such as the Prince Psalms Inn, where Elaine had taken a summer job as resident manager. The stories surrounding this haunted hotel had persisted for nearly 2 centuries.
There's no way I could stay there another night. You do understand that, don't you?
Yes.
Plus, everybody made a joke out of the whole thing. Even my friends.
They attributed your encounter to the ghost that supposedly haunts the hotel?
That's why I had to get away. Think everything over. Even the newspapers made me sound like a fool.
I'm sorry, Miss Stafford. I found in my own experiences that people who've had actual encounters like yours don't enjoy talking about them. Even friends can be very cruel at times. But I really would appreciate it if you could describe to me exactly what you saw that night. Elaine Stafford's story made me realize that many extraterrestrial encounters were probably passed off as ghost stories. It opened up for me one more area of possible research into the subject to which I had now devoted my life. Here, hidden amid all the trappings of the traditional ghost story, were the telltale sounds and the descriptions to convince me that Elaine had actually seen a humanoid visitor from another world. Mrs. Arlen, for the past 5 years, I've been traveling, investigating every phenomenon from alien astronauts to Atlantis to the Bermuda Triangle, even Bigfoot. I'm a scientist. I'm an astronomer.
Really?
Well, an unemployed astronomer. At one time, I worked for the IRAO.
The International Radio Astronomy Observatory. Which installation?
Alaska.
Were you working there in 1974? The Barnard Star Project?
Hardly, Mrs. Arlen. Our radio telescope was destroyed in the Alaskan earthquake the year before. The site was never rebuilt. You knew it, didn't you?
Yes, I was testing you.
Funny you should mention Barnard's star. 7 light years away. I know that that planet is there.
It's an unusual statement for a scientist, isn't it?
I've heard those messages. They were intelligence signals, not a statistical error or radio interference, as so many of my colleagues say.
What did they sound like?
A voice transmission of some kind. One signal repeated itself exactly 3 times. They were artificial sounds from space, not natural ones as reported. But they were too short. We weren't able to record enough information to decode them.
What are your colleagues doing about this now?
They're still monitoring Barnard's star. But I think that the inhabitants on that planet are sending out signals to a point in the universe, then changing to another, and then another, to cover as much area as possible. But the problem is, they may not come back to sending their signals in our direction for decades. A lifetime.
So that's why you dropped out.
That's right. I mean, I don't have that much time to get the answers.
Mr. Reed, exactly what is it that you're looking for here?
Mrs. Arlen, in your husband's book, he states certain theories that parallel my own conclusions. In it, he also speaks about his Betatron project. I must see it.
I see.
The following day, I was allowed to visit the Eagle Rock area for the first time. Mrs. Arlen had enlisted her son Steve to be my guide. I was told that I could see the Betatron project from a distance, but that no one had been permitted inside since Dr. Arlen's death. The whole morning, Steve did his level best to let me know just how much he resented anybody snooping around. I read about this in your dad's book. Fascinating.
Really? I don't know a lot about it.
What?
This was all my dad's dream. Supposed to prolong human life or something. Didn't do much for him, though.
Well, as I understand it, this machine was being constructed by your father to rejuvenate human body cells. He spent over 18 years of his life working on it.
That's why I wasn't much interested. My body cells are in pretty fair shape. I never could get into the rejuvenation scene.
Oh? And what scene are you into?
You know, hard rock, drugs, sex, the usual stuff. Plus, I get my driver's license in a month. Now, if I can just con Mom out of enough for a car.
I get it. Typical teenager, huh?
Damn right.
Yeah. I see the landing area now.
I'll drive. It's hard to find.
I thought you didn't have a driver's license.
I have a learner's permit. We're not going on the main highway. All dirt roads. It's legal. I drive in my mother's car all the time.
It was obvious that both Steve and his mother were highly suspicious of my motive for being there. But I also had the feeling they were scared. It made me wonder exactly what had happened to them since Dr. Arlen's death. Eagle Rock itself was the spot I'd read so much about. Here, for many years, UFO observers from throughout the world, led by Dr. Arlen himself, had gathered to await the arrival of alien spacecraft. This was the place where astronauts from some distant planet had appeared to just a handful of believers. Now, Eagle Rock was quiet. It felt strange to me, like a lifeless museum diorama.
Can I ask you one more thing?
Sure.
How come you don't have a camera? Everybody who comes out here takes pictures.
Like I told your mother, I'm not a writer doing a new UFO book. And I'm certainly not working for the FBI, the CIA, and the PTA. I'm not trying to hurt you and your mother, like you both think. For God knows what reason.
How do I know that?
I guess you probably never will. All I can do is try to give you straight answers to all your questions. You really want to know why I don't have a camera? I had to sell it. I needed the money. You believe me?
Okay.
During the long drive back to the Arlen home, Steve actually loosened up, started to communicate a little with me. The questions he asked were a little more friendly anyway. I felt he almost wanted to talk to me about something important, something that had been bothering him, like why he and his mother were so frightened. I spent the rest of the afternoon and that evening reviewing Dr. Arlen's books, especially the chapters that describe his direct communication with alien beings. Before it got too late, I decided to call Mrs. Arlen again, just to thank her for allowing me to visit. Well, to be absolutely honest, I was damn curious and a little worried about what was going on out there. I was shocked. She was like a different person. Apparently, Steve's report about me had been favorable because she invited me back. Said that her son would take me to meet a friend of his who recently discovered an unidentified object of some kind in his backyard. Strange. It's perfectly round. If it came from space, like a meteor, it would have one side flattened, wouldn't it?
Not if it slowed down before it hit.
What?
It was Steve's idea. Tell him about it, why don't you? Come on, you don't think he's a MIB, otherwise you wouldn't have invited him here.
What's a MIB?
Men in Black. My dad called them MIBs. It's a code name. They're guys who showed up after UFO sightings, asking a lot of questions with really no reason.
Steve, your father was being watched by somebody, wasn't he? Who?
For years before he died, my dad was being followed by the Men in Black.
What project was he working on?
Integratron. He would sometimes work at Eagle Rock for a week straight. He got to be afraid to go outside. That's one reason he got so sick. He didn't eat right or care about himself. He just wanted to finish his work. But,
Thank you for explaining, Steve.
Well, anyway.
My guess had been correct. There was something very wrong here. Steve and his mother were obviously victims of the same relentless fear that Dr. Arlen had experienced for years. But why? Who were the Men in Black? And what were they trying to accomplish? Steve went on to tell me about how he and his friend Wally had found the metal object during a party one night. But there was something else he wanted me to know. And I figured he'd tell once he was certain he could trust me.
What's wrong?
Nothing, Wally. It's just... Oh, God.
Listen, Turkey, like I just wrote the song. You don't expect her to know all the words.
It's not the song, Wally. It's just...
Fine. I'm not even gonna do the second verse.
Steve, you're such a...
Walt, I'm sorry. I liked it too.
Sure you do.
What is that? What? A flash. exploded. You guys think it was a plane?
I didn't hear anything. Did you?
A meteor. There's lots of them this time of year.
No. This was a tremendous yellow flash, and it was right there.
My theory about that thing is that it's a magnetic probe from space for gathering information, like a weather balloon.
Yeah, except coming down instead of going up. You explain it.
It's small enough to land at night, but not be noticed. Maybe it rolls along or floats above the ground, collecting data about our planet. Then it takes off and goes back to where it came from.
A UFO.
When we first saw it lying in the backyard, it seemed to glow a little. Then it would become transparent, like it was trying to conceal itself from us. It did that a couple of times, back and forth. Then it turned visible like that.
Steve thinks that it's broken, so it couldn't go back to where it came from.
Have you shown this to anyone else?
I was going to call the newspaper to have them do an article on me and how I found it in my yard, but when Steve told me about
The Men in Black? The next day, we returned to Eagle Rock.
You're awful quiet, Al. Is anything wrong?
No. You want to rest a minute? Steve wanted to show me where certain unusual things had taken place, very close to the Betatron.
You know, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday.
About Wally's space probe?
At first I thought it was intriguing, but pretty far-fetched. Nothing personal.
It's just my stupid theory. What does the 15-year-old know about anything anyway? You're a scientist. Do you think it came from a UFO?
I think you know a lot more about some of these things than I do. Were you close to your father?
I used to help him quite a bit sometimes. He told me a lot about some of his theories.
How do you ever get started on the Betatron?
Well, you probably read how he was able to communicate with the aliens.
Oh, yes. Did they show him how to build it?
They told him some things about it, like the principle behind how it works. But Dad designed it himself.
Steve, why do you think some alien civilization out there would care enough about us to travel light years away from their planet just to teach us how to build a machine to prolong our lives? Doesn't really make sense, does it?
Maybe they're not like us.
You mean there are certain things man cannot understand? Doesn't have the intelligence to comprehend?
Of course we don't understand. We're still trying to keep track of which nations hate each other the most. But it's not like that on certain other planets.
No? What's it like then?
Hard to explain. It's not that man doesn't have the brain power or the senses to understand. It's a matter of how people have conditioned their minds.
We limit our thinking.
And reasoning and feeling. We limit the use of all parts of the brain. You've heard that a million times, right? Picture a place. Out there. Inhabited by beings who look pretty much like we do. Their planet's about the same age as Earth. They've evolved at the same rate. With one exception.
Their mental abilities are much greater than ours.
You've heard that idea before, too.
In every science fiction movie I've ever seen.
Well, it's for real.
Are you telling me there actually is another planet like ours? With people who look like us?
Not just one. Millions of them that have been discovered so far. You heard signals from one of them.
Barnard Star.
That planet's a lot like Earth, except drier, more deserts, with only a third of its surface covered with water. But it's beautiful, really. So my dad said.
Your father was visited by people from Barnard Star. So they told him how to build a machine to prolong life. Why?
So maybe we could live long enough to use what we learn.
I was thankful we brought the canteen. For some reason, I couldn't get enough to drink. Steve, strangely enough, never seemed to be thirsty. During lunch, he was in good spirits. In fact, it was the first time I saw him really kid around. Usually, he was so serious. Eventually, the conversation turned to Steve's father. He'd been pretty much like I'd imagined, a real outdoorsman who spent lots of time hiking and camping with his son. Steve told me about some of the strange occurrences he had helped his father investigate. By coincidence, the one he elaborated on the most graphically, just as I started to eat my sandwich, was the topic of animal mutilations. I had read dozens of reports before about those strange discoveries that had been made by ranchers throughout the Southwest. The most popular theory was that certain aliens were gathering data concerning Earth radiation levels and their effects on living animals. The animals, usually cattle and other domestic livestock, had always been found surgically mutilated, although mutilation was probably the wrong word, since the incisions were perfect. with certain internal organs carefully removed and missing. Steve's story was somewhat different, though. It was one of the only reports I'd heard about wild animals having been mutilated. Seems a rancher who lived a few miles from Eagle Rock had been tracking a killer wolf, responsible for the death of some of his cattle. The man reported he had heard strange sounds, possibly a spacecraft, in the vicinity. He also heard yelps, cries, like an animal caught in a trap. Sounded like it came from behind a small ridge, a short distance away. Found his wolf all right, but someone, or something else, had gotten there first. The animal had just been dissected, alive.
My God. Okay, boys, here's the wolf. Been killing all the cattle. Tracked him for 4 hours, but I didn't kill him. You want to look at him? Go ahead.
Still don't understand why you've brought me way up here. Just so you could tell me these things without our being overheard by the men in black?
Well, actually, I thought you just might be interested in seeing the spot where my dad talked to the visitors from Barnard Star.
Interested? Can you take me there?
Easy. Just look around. My dad watched the spacecraft approach along those hills, flying low. Then it would hover for a long time, an hour or more, until the little space probes had been sent out to survey the area to make sure it was safe for the travelers to come out.
So, you knew about the space probes all along?
Well, sort of. At first, I didn't know, even though my dad had one following me everywhere when he was afraid the MIBs might try to hurt me. You should have seen my face when Dad told me about Charlie.
Charlie? Steve then told me about a time not long before when Dr. Arlen had become so ill he couldn't go outside. So Steve spent a lot of time by himself, hiking and thinking, remembering the good times he'd spent with his dad, As he talked, I could easily see that those were lonely days for Steve. He would just walk by himself, visit the places where the two of them had spent so much time together. Dr. Arlen had apparently been given one of the space probes as a gift from the alien visitors. They had designed and built the probes to survey the Earth's surface, gathering scientific data, which was retained in a tiny magnetic memory bank inside the probes themselves. Later, they would fly back to the spacecraft and convey the information they'd gathered into the ship's master computers. This information was essential to their understanding of our planet, and it also served to help navigate the spacecraft when it came in close to the Earth's surface. Through a process of light refraction, the little probes could become almost invisible, transparent anyway, to avoid detection. This didn't affect their ability to do their jobs, recording temperatures, taking humidity readings, even making spectrographic analyses of the mineral content of the rocks, plus storing thousands of other bits of information about our planet. It had been Dr. Arlen's idea to acquire one of the probes as an unseen companion for his son. Dr. Arlen even gave the little instrument a name, Charlie. It was Charlie's job to use his surveillance abilities to protect Steve, to alert the doctor if his son was headed for danger. Charlie took his responsibility very seriously, too. He kept a tab on Steve's whereabouts whenever the young man went hiking alone. Charlie would scope out the trail up ahead of Steve, keep his keen electronic eye checking every rock and ridge in case Steve might be followed, and in the process doing his best to not be discovered by Steve. Only problem was, Charlie was a little noisy when he worked. He couldn't help that, of course. He had quite a few circuits inside him, all of which were activated by tiny relays. When his electronic sensors would feed too many signals at once into his memory bank, Charlie went berserk. Steve claimed that he knew all along somebody was watching him, but he didn't know who. He just felt he was being watched. Wally's broken space probe. That's Charlie.
Oh, no. Charlie's still healthy and happy. He's watching us right now. Of course, he wouldn't show himself with you here. Yeah. He's so funny. Operated by a computerized gyro. But he has a force field surrounding him that could be very dangerous.
Steve told me that he knew about Charlie the first time he took Wally hiking. But Charlie liked playing around, so Steve found himself making up excuses.
What was that?
I don't know. Sonic boom, I guess.
Wally had just moved to Eagle Rock from the city, and he didn't believe in UFOs. Their first camping trip made Wally change his thinking, however.
Why don't we just forget breakfast? Everything's so dirty from last night.
I thought you were going to fix pancakes.
Well, how about an apple?
No.
Or a peanut butter sandwich? And I have candy, too.
This stuff's for lunch, though.
This is not for lunch, too. Coffee's ready.
Well, I don't drink coffee. I thought it was hot chocolate.
No, but it's hot. Drink it.
Hey, were we going to camp at Eagle Rock tonight? Maybe we'll see a flying saucer show up with little green men.
You think UFOs are just a joke, don't you, Wally?
I don't know. I'd have to see one to believe it. Some outer space people. I wouldn't be afraid. If there was any flying saucers around, I mean real ones, and they landed here, I'd try to go on board. I heard about a lady who went on board one and they flew her around for a couple hours for free. If you want to see a flying saucer, you gotta keep your eyes open, because they only hang around for a couple seconds. If there was anything out here, I'd spot it right away.
There it is.
That night, the two young men had pitched their tent at the base of Eagle Rock. It was Wally who awakened, heard the unusual sound coming from the cliff above. He had convinced himself earlier of his own courage, so he set out to confront whatever it was. According to Steve, from that night onward, Wally changed his mind about UFOs. The short hike Steve told me we'd take turned out to be more like Sir Edmund Hillary's assault on Mount Everest. At least it seemed that way. With my crepe-soled shoes, I wasn't exactly equipped for hiking, let alone rock climbing. So I just held on, tried to keep from slipping, and tried not to think about the fact that I hadn't had a workout like this one in 10 years. I didn't attempt to get Steve to tell me why he was putting me through all this. I knew there was a reason. Either he was taking me someplace that was somehow significant to his father's research, or he hated me and was hoping I'd have a stroke. Some view.
I knew you'd like it. My dad's Betatron. You can't see it from here, but if you could, it's right behind that second ridge.
Is that what you wanted to show me?
No. Look down over on this side.
That's where we parked the car yesterday. We could have driven out here instead
Not without being followed.
Well, no one followed us.
We were being watched every second. They followed us the moment we left my house.
The men in black?
In a gray van. The same one that was parked outside my house the day you met my mom.
And they're following me now.
I think so. Be careful, Al.
That night, I didn't even try to sleep. It wasn't really fear of the men in black following me, although that was on my mind. No, I just kept reliving all that had happened during the past several days. How both Mrs. Arlen and her son had seemed so frightened. Unfriendly at first, and yet they had finally shared quite a lot of information with me about Eagle Rock and Dr. Arlen's studies. If only Dr. David Arlen himself were still alive, maybe he could have interpreted those signals from Barnard's star for me. More confused than ever. I felt so close to some kind of answer, so I went back again to Dr. Arlen's books to see if, in the light of what I had learned at Eagle Rock, I could discover something he had written that I had missed before. But I couldn't even concentrate on Arlen's book. Instead, I kept recalling all that his son had told me. How he had insisted we climb Eagle Rock. But why? Was I supposed to go back there? Are the visitors from Barnard's Star due to return? I left for Eagle Rock early the next morning. I thought about calling Mrs. Arlen first, but then decided against it. Maybe it wasn't intended that I should return to meet the spacecraft. Maybe I was wrong in my judgment, but I felt very strongly compelled to find out for certain.
Charlie's still healthy and happy. He's watching us right now. Of course, he wouldn't show himself with you here.
Now, I knew the answer for sure. I was meant to return to Eagle Rock. I had to find the spot where Steve and I had eaten lunch. The place where Dr. David Arlen had his encounters with the aliens. Steve, why do you think some civilization out there would care enough about us to travel light years away from their planet just to teach us how to build a machine to prolong our lives?
Maybe they're not like us.
You mean there are certain things man cannot understand?
Of course we don't understand. We're still trying to keep track of which nations hate each other the most. Picture a place out there, inhabited by beings who look pretty much like we do.
Are you telling me there actually is another planet like ours? With people who look like us?
Not just one. Millions of them that have been discovered so far. You heard signals from one of them.
I tried to find the place Steve had led me to, where Dr. Arlen had gone to communicate with the aliens from Barnard's star, but somehow I couldn't quite retrace our steps. I had lost the trail. I saw something on a ledge below me. Like a briefcase, but how? Was a briefcase. Someone had left it, or lost it. I felt I should see if there was some identification inside. inside was a calendar. A logbook, actually. A daily logbook. Containing handwritten entries. Mostly scientific data. Formulas. Notations concerning the construction of the Betatron. They were written in Dr. Arlen's handwriting. This had belonged to David Arlen. But why was it out here? Had Dr. Arlen hidden it before he died? No, it wasn't hidden. I had spotted it easily from above. As I read on, I started to wonder, what connection was there between Steve's bringing me here for no special reason and the strange compulsion I felt to return today to Eagle Rock? It was starting to get dark. I knew I'd have to get down the mountain before nightfall. I had definitely confirmed one thing. Not only were these Dr. Arlen's notes, but apparently plans for the construction of the Betatron machine. I had to get them back to Mrs. Arlen tonight. I wondered if the men in black had anything to do with this being here.
Hello, Mr. Reed. This is David Arlen speaking. Lisa and my son must return home today. They both regret very much not being able to see you before leaving, to say goodbye in person. I fear for their safety, though. They've stayed on your planet too long already. I'm sorry that you and I didn't have the chance to meet personally, but you should know that both Lisa and Stephen give you the highest recommendations humanly possible. This is why I'm turning all of my plans for constructing the Betatron over to you, in the hope that you'll be able to make good use of them sometime in the future. Then, perhaps the work I started at Eagle Rock will continue somewhere else someday, for the benefit of all your people. Once again, thank you for being so good to my son. I hope we all may meet someday in the future.
Your father was visited by people from Barnard's Star. So they told him how to build a machine to prolong life. What?
So maybe we could live long enough to use what we learned. So maybe we could live long enough to use what we learned. So maybe we could live long enough to use what we learned.